Still to come, Politico just named her one of the 18 people in Washington to watch this year on their power list. Congresswoman Jayapal joins us next. Congressman Jayapal of Washington State was among the first to call for Conyers' resignation and is a co-sponsor of the bill ending forced arbitration of sexual harassment. And she joins me now. Congresswoman, thank you so much for taking the time tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it. I want to pick up where Mr. Alderman left off, because we are, I think, at a point where we are reckoning with how does this conversation proceed and how should people be punished in the event that there is bad behavior that's uncovered. Do you think the pendulum has swung too far, or is this really just an equalizing of the scales?
I think it's an equalizing of the scales. Look, I think we've had for decades, maybe more than decades, a lot of these incidents happening all over. Women were not able to come forward at that time. Finally, we're at a place where women are coming forward. The pendulum is swinging. I do think ultimately we're going to have processes within Congress, within the private sector, that really look at all these allegations quickly, transparently, with accountability. But right now, the process that we have is not there. The committees that are empowered to look at these things within Congress simply do not have what they need to really be able to take care of these things quickly. And so there are efforts to try and change that. But I think at this point we have to hold ourselves to a higher moral standard. And when you have, it's true that not one size fits everything, but when you have credible allegations, multiple allegations, you've got outside confirmation, I do think it's incumbent on those lawmakers to step aside and, you know, allow us to continue to allow the American people to have faith in their elected officials.
Do you see a distinction between what's gone on with John Conyers, with Blake Farenthold, and what happened with Senator Franken? Do you think that his what he did was any less bad, should have had a different punishment, or do you agree with those calls?
I think the hard thing is that if you're having a conversation about did he grope a breast or some other part of the body, or, you know, how many times did he grope and what circumstances, it's the wrong conversation to have. I think that we are at a place where women need to have the ability to come forward, which they haven't had before. And I think that this could be a watershed moment, but it depends on how we deal with it. If we start to have the pendulum swing too much to the other side again, then, you know, I think it's going to be very discouraging for women. I think it's an empowering thing that women are coming forward. I know a couple of the women that were named in that article in the Washington State Senate when I was there. I've heard these stories from lobbyists, and certainly every single one of us as women in various businesses has dealt with these on different levels.
Everyone has a Me Too story.
Everyone has a Me Too story of some kind. And when I speak at press conferences and all the email and letters I've gotten, I would say 95% of them are saying, thank you. Thank you for continuing to speak out on these issues. Thank you for making sure that we address them as a country. And thank you for believing in us, women.
Somebody who was here earlier on the show, I think it was Jeremy Peters, mentioned that there were many, we showed some clips of men defending and saying, hey, this, including Newt Gingrich, who said this was a lynch mob for Al Franken. I can't help but notice that oftentimes women talk about this a little bit differently. We have Nikki Haley talking about this earlier today, asked about it in the context of the president. Take a look.
How do you think people should assess the accusers of the president?
Well, I mean, the same thing as women who accuse anyone should be heard. They should be heard and they should be dealt with. And I think we heard from them prior to the election. And I think any woman who has felt violated or felt mistreated in any way, they have every right to speak up.
And does the election mean that's a settled issue?
You know, that's for the people to decide. I know that he was elected, but, you know, women should always feel comfortable coming forward, and we should all be willing to listen to them.
Just strikes me that the tone is much different.
It's very different. And I think that, you know, I wrote a piece for Huffington Post, and at the end I said, you know, to all the guys out there who call themselves feminists, who are proud because they have daughters in the workplace or sisters or whatever, this is the time for you to speak up. In order to make the culture shift we're going to have to make, we need men to be standing up as well, and we need to fundamentally change how we respond to these allegations, because for too long we just haven't believed these women.
And it seems like the other piece of this is more women actually being in positions of power in the
I think
Congress.
it makes a big difference. We have that conversation all the time. You know, in my office, it's hard to imagine some of the things that are being said and done. And there was a lieutenant governor candidate, I think in Michigan, who has an ad that's based all around around this. Interesting strategy. But I think it gets to the point that, you know, it was women who broke the story. It has been women who have been continuing to cover the story in a big way. And I think it has been women in the Senate, for example, who really called on Al Franken to step aside. So I do think it matters that we have power in these halls.
Congressman Jayapal, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you so
really
much,
appreciate
Kasie.
it.